Thank you for attending. We'll have another roughly 9 minutes together. Actually, all the last sessions when we said 90 minutes, it was much more than that because there were so many questions. And for many attendees, it's the first time to hear something about project business, to be able to ask questions and to have some discussions. And we enjoy this as well. So we are very open for that. The idea today is different to last Tuesday when we talked about the contractor side in project business management. Now we look at the other side, the customer side. There is more literature on the customer side out there than on the contractor side, but I think it goes much further today, and we do much more things today in project business management as customers than what is discussed in literature and what is discussed in seminars and in academia, in associations, and so on, apart from Project Business Foundation, of course. So let's talk about what it means if your project management task is no more the task of leading internal teams and motivating your own people and so on, but when it comes to doing this with people from outside. I think the majority of you have heard something about me. Here are some things about me, born 1975, university studies and so on. I don't want to spend too much time in here. One thing is really missing in the list, and that's why I'm telling it to you here. Co-founder and president of the Project Business Foundation. Yeah, I wrote some books on the topic. Actually, it began with situational project management, a discussion that in another context came up just yesterday again. How did the whole thing start? It started with a simple question: how can it be that certain methods, approaches, practices that have been successful in one situation, in one project, may fail in another one? And I did some research on that, and I wrote a book on that, and that's the blue book here, Situational Project Management, The Dynamics of Success and Failure. And when I did that together with a group of experts, I wasn't alone. I had 17 colleagues, people from PMOs, yeah, people from project management magazines with me. And when we discussed this all, we developed a typology of projects. And there was one thing that really jumped into my eyes. When we look how projects are different and have different requirements on methods and approaches and practices and so on, there is a big difference between projects that are just done internally and projects that are done in a cross-corporate fashion. And this was a big step forward. And this led to my second book, Project Business Management of 2018. By the way, republished just these days as a paperback. So Project Business Management, the book, is now more affordable. I have no influence to the price policy of the of the publishing organization, but I think this is now affordable, so people can really buy that. I'm very happy that they did that. So if you look for the paperback, you will find it at a lower price, much lower price than the hardcover version, which is still on the market, of course. I wrote a lot of papers on the topic, mostly 2017 to 2020, now 2.5 years. Almost every month a paper on the topic, and I look at the topic from the contractor side. Sometimes I look at it from the customer side. Sometimes the last one was both sides at the same time. It was about Goliath and David in project business, and how rattling and unsettling it can be to run into things like court cases if you're a small contractor or a small customer working with a big company here, and how to survive such a situation. My favorism is always with the small companies. I'm happy to work for big companies, but the small companies are those who often need more help. The big companies make some mistakes that small companies don't make, so one can help them as well. So what are the contents of our session today before we all go into our weekend? Some have the day in front of themselves. Others are just in the evening, of course, depending on the time zone. But we are all somehow looking forward to going into weekend. So thank you for joining us here, nevertheless. From internally performed projects to complex procurement. It's just about procurement here and there. It is about complex procurement. It's about procurement where we have things like supply networks, often very complex supply networks with whom we do our project. Then what are the challenges when projects become the businesses? By the way, many of you, I think, were with us in the last Tuesday session when we talked about the contractor side. And a lot of the things we will discuss here will sound familiar to you. They will be repetition for you because some of the problems are really similar or even the same on both sides. I don't think repetition in learning is a bad thing. The old Romans said repetition is the mother of learning. So I hope you don't mind that. I want to talk about a solution. And again, those who were with us on Tuesday know the solution. And then I hope that we will have another interesting Q&A session together. It was very interesting last Tuesday. A lot of very, very good questions. And I think I heard of a lot of people who should really be volunteers at the Project Business Foundation and help us shape this profession. It's not a new profession, but it's new that people are there to shape it. So let's start with a question. What has happened to you when you go from internally performed projects to not only just procurement, but to complex procurement? I would like to introduce you to Mark Miller. Mark Miller is a project manager. And he's a project manager. He has a project that goes very well. Yeah. Internal projects, that's his world. Yeah. He works in projects for his own employer. Yeah. Implements things like strategic initiatives. That's typical for internal projects. Bringing change to the organization. Yeah. Implementing strategy, closing the gap between strategy and implementation, all these big things, and I'm not demeaning them here. They are important. These are important topics, and that's where he is, developing new products, new services. That's the future maybe of the organization to do that. Building teams across the organization, cross-functional teams, matrix teams inside a matrix, and we will discuss this just in a minute. So that's where he's really, really strong. What does it mean to have an internal team? I have an example here. We have a division manager on top. In this division, we have several departments, and in these departments, we have employees. That's a very normal line organization, a functional organization. Nothing really special here. We see this very often in organizations. And what we see is that our department managers have, in my little example, between 3 and 6 employees. That's normal in real life. Some departments are larger, some are smaller. And an interesting observation that we can often make in many organizations, particularly in old organizations, in very strict organizations, the more employees a department manager has in the department, the stronger the person is, the more influence the person has. It's very important for department managers to have large departments. It means they have a strong influence in the organization. They have participated strongly in the value creation of the organization, in the value stream, value chain, however you want to call that, inside the organization. And they are much better connected inside the organizations because each of these employees has friends and colleagues they like, and they talk about things. So it's also a kind of network that these people have, the department managers have. And obviously, in my example, department manager 3's network through the employees is not as strong as that. That's the network of department manager 4, who has twice as many employees. It's very likely department manager 4 will also have a larger budget, and many other things that come with this big number of employees. It gives them power, it gives them influence, which in turn means department managers are, in many organizations, not in all, in many organizations not that happy when the project manager comes along and says, I need someone for my project. Yeah, at least temporarily, it feels for them like a loss of power, a loss of influence to give employees away. If the project manager is a good project manager, and if the systems are well developed in the organization, you can overcome this problem. But first of all, the problem is there and needs to be overcome. And I have an example here where exactly that happens. What we see here is a project team which somehow goes across the line organization, the functional organization. That's why we call it a cross-functional team here. And this is the situation that we commonly describe as a matrix organization. Matrix means we have two overlapping hierarchies here, if you like, systems of hierarchy here. One is the project, which is led by a project manager, in my little example, with two leads and then several team members. But we also have a hierarchy inside the functional organization, and there's some overlapping there. There's a core problem, a very common, deep problem in matrix organizations like this one, and that's that people become masters of two servants. To give you an example, let's have a look at team member number 3. No, sorry, this was the wrong laser pointer here. Team member number 3 is an example here. Team member number 3 now has two lines of command, if you like, or two superiors at the same time, two masters. One is department manager 3, but the other one is the project manager. So what happens if conflicting questions, requests maybe, or commands even come to them? The project manager needs urgently a report on the progress of team member number 3. But at the same time, the department manager wants some urgent numbers and some elaborate documents or something like that, reports from team member 3. Who will get the response first? Who will get it in a better condition, more elaborate? Where will the team member put more effort and maybe even more love into the work? Which does the person like more doing? It could well be, in many organizations at least, that the department manager will be in the stronger position, and that's what we call a weak matrix. Weak from the position, from the point of view of the project manager, who may be not really in the role of the project manager. Often they are called a project coordinator. Coordinator as a signal, this is a very weak project manager, doesn't really take part in decision making, coordinate some things there, but it's very, very weak. I saw a lot of young people really getting burned in the role of a project coordinator. I think it's a very dangerous situation to have such a role as a project manager. Project managers, project management team often work part-time in the weak matrix. That's a very normal situation there. Not long ago, I met someone from chemical industry, and he had a project over many million euros, and the person was expected to do this part-time in addition to some other day-by-day work that the person was expected to do. And normally I would say you need a dedicated project manager for that, but the organization didn't think it's necessary. And the problems that this project had to a major degree a root cause in this weak matrix situation, in this part-time project manager, really for a big project. Functional managers are often those who have the budget. In a weak matrix, it's quite normal that the project manager doesn't have a budget at all. The project manager is expected to do some scheduling and HR planning and task planning and so on, maybe look at risks, but not look at a budget and at costs. Someone else is doing that. It could be the project sponsor. Often it's the project sponsor or even someone else. So they don't have a known budget in here, which makes them very weak because they cannot go out and buy resources if some resources are not available inside the organization. Another reason why they can't do that, staffing, procurement, all those things are done inside the functional organization. If they want to buy something for their project, they have to go to a purchasing department or a procurement department there. If they need people, they have to go to the HR department, and then they have to work with the contractors, with the staff that they get through these departments. And the way these departments are measured, are evaluated, their KPIs or whatever you want to call it, are different to those of the project. So it may not be the best people they get. Resource availability, low and unreliable. It's not just low. It's hard to get people on board to the project. But even then it could be, I expect someone to work for me in September, and now I hear that the person will not be available just in September, just when I need this person. Or sometimes worse, the person is doing something differently and nobody is telling me. The person is already no more working for the project, and the project manager is the last one to know. All these aspects here, all these attributes of the weak matrix often lead to a poor reputation of the project manager. I remember I live in a neighborhood. Most of my neighbors are from BMW. I remember a BMW production manager telling me repeatedly, Oliver, if we in production would meet our deadlines as poorly as our project managers do, BMW would no more exist. Long I thought, that's an unfair comparison. I told him that. That's an unfair comparison. The normally very predictable and orderly world of production, and then the unpredictable, risky world of projects. Comparing that is not really fair. But at one point in time, I noted what he's actually telling me. On top of that, of course, is a different thing. He told me how poor the reputation is of project managers in this area, in this field. And then I told people from Volkswagen the story and from Mercedes the story. And they told me, hey, that's funny. People here say precisely the same. Poor reputation of project managers in weak matrix. Strong matrix, can it be there? I think there's a strong driver for that. Maybe the strongest, not always true, there are exceptions, but a strong driver, customer projects. Customer projects, project managers are much, much stronger, and they are called project managers. Sometimes they are called program managers, not because the project is a program or so. It's just to give the customer the feeling you get something special from us and someone special from us as well. So to raise the perception of being important for the customer. Project manager, project management team in comparatively small projects are already full-time. That's how the company makes money. So they assign a full-time project manager, maybe even a full-time team to the project, because if something goes wrong, the income of the organization will be directly affected by that. So it's important that things don't go wrong. Another reason, by the way, is this is done under contract. Most people in the world don't have many things anymore that are holy and sacred to them. One exception for many people, not all unfortunately, but for many people, is contracts. Contracts, we know if we not meet our contractual obligations, it's full of troubles, full of difficulties. We try to avoid that. So sticking with the contract, meeting contractual obligations is an important thing for organizations. And that's one of the reasons why there is a full-time project manager, full-time project management team there to make sure that the organization does not run into a breach of contract situation. Project managers on the strong matrix side, as I said, a common example is customer projects. They have their own budget. The budget is very easy to get for these people. The customer pays them a price, say fixed price, 100,000 euros. The company wants to keep 20,000 out of that. So 80,000 is the budget for the project. And that's very simple. And it works with every kind of contract. They often do their own staffing and procurement on the strong matrix side. Why that? Because they get the people. They get the people on board, they get the contractors on board that they need for the project. The project is the lifeblood of the organization, the contractor at least. Yeah. Resource availability, therefore, is high and it's reliable. If we expect people to work for us, it's very likely that they will work for us. And this leads to a higher reputation, a much higher reputation of the project manager inside the own organization, contract organization here. So there are two major exceptions to these rules. One exception on the weak metric side is if you have some, say, legal obligations. The project goes against legal obligations. It's a regulatory project, a mandatory project, and there is a deadline by law. And if you miss the deadline, it may be that some of the managers have to go to jail, maybe. This is something that can really make projects very, very strong. I saw such a situation 15 years ago when there was in America legislation that companies needed to meet Sarbanes-Oxley Act to protect shareholders. And I remember a CFO, we sat in a meeting and he told me, Oliver, I don't want to go to jail. Yeah? So and that's what they would have done if that would the person would have done if they would have not met a deadline, 15th of June 2006, I remember, for non-American companies. So this can make internal projects very, very strong. Regulations, legal requirements. Can there be a weak matrix in customer projects? Yes, mostly when there are many, many projects done, customer-facing projects done concurrently by one organization. Then we find it can turn into weak metrics. The problem is not so much the competition between line organization, functional organization on one side and projects on the other side. It's more the competition, project versus project versus project. And it's often the desire of the organization to somehow operationalize project management, which I think is no good idea. In some organizations, we find a balanced matrix. Balanced matrix means project managers and operational managers, line managers are on eye level. They sit together and they do not allow situations where people are servants of two masters. They make decisions for these people, take the burden from the people to disappoint either the line manager or the project manager. So that's what balanced matrix would be doing. And I said already, weak matrix is very typical for internal projects. Not always, there are exceptions, but it's very common there. And strong matrix is very common for customer projects. So Mark, as we saw with his internal projects, is obviously on the left-hand side. His job is to navigate the project inside the organization. I think it goes back to Mao Zedong. He said, revolutionary has to move among the people like a fish in the water. And that's precisely what project managers and internal project managers have to be good in. They have to master things like stakeholder orientation, servant leadership, a common topic for them. Persuasiveness, that have to persuade people to support their projects. They don't have power. They don't have technical means or financial means to do that. They have to use their ability to persuade people. Social skills. Yeah? They must talk with people who are powerful, much more powerful and they need to have the ability to influence them. And another important thing, I believe, here is self-control. It's often very frustrating. I see these project managers, I see them in my seminars, and I see how much help they need. And it's not just technical things and methods and tools and techniques and so on. It's also to help them come along with frustration. And there's a lot of frustration there. Now something is changing in his organizations. A shortage of people, tools, materials, know-how, and so on, he finds out that there is not enough there in these resources for him to do his project. And worst of all, another resource is lacking, and this resource is management attention. I have a theory that the scarcest and most valuable resource in projects is management attention. Unfortunately, the PIMBO guide and the PMI environment has changed the definition of what resources are. And I think it went back to a very old definition: people, materials, tools, and so on, calls it human resources and physical resources. Humans are not physical, obviously. We had in the past a much wider and I think a much stronger definition on the term resources. It would include people, materials, tools, and so on, but also qualifications, skills, know-how, and so on. Time could sometimes be one. Licenses could be a resource. Everything that is only available in limited quantities. And so we have to ask ourselves, and we have to plan, how are we going to use that? And we may be in competition with the line organization, with other projects on the use of these resources. And in this wider definition, I think much younger definition at the same time, I would add another resource, and that's management attention. Management attention is the key resource of all. If you have management attention, I cannot guarantee you that you will have people, tools, and so on. But if you don't have management attention, I promise you there will be a shortage of people, of tools, materials, and so on. It is the key resource, and particularly in internal projects, it is very, very important to ensure you have sufficient management attention. And obviously, there's a shortage in that as well. By the way, why is it there? Because many organizations do too many projects concurrently. They do more projects than what they can actually do with the people, with the tools, materials they have, and with the management attention. Management is getting overburdened with a need for attention for the many, many projects they have. But they have to do them. That's their feeling. So they overtax themselves, overtax the organization, the people inside the organizations. And our project manager, like Mark, who is actually a good project manager, runs into a problem. How am I going to deal with that? And he asks his boss. By the way, if he asks his boss this question, he's a very good project manager. Too many don't ask this question at all. How do you expect me to perform this project without resources? That's the question. So what does the organization do? They make a make or buy decision here. Make means this project will in the future be an internal project done with internal resources. Buy means the organization is going to tap into external assets and turn them into project resources. Someone else's assets for the project as resources, by the way, including things like management attention. I think management attention is a big driver in this story. I have a survey here, 2.5 years old, a bit more than that, 590 responses. One of the best surveys in responses that I made so far. And I asked people, if you look at make or buy decisions, what is your trend? Is the trend more towards making more by yourself or buying from other sides, from other organizations? And we see some organizations tend more towards make. Green is for the recent past. Red is for the near future. And we see there are some turning more to the left, but many more turning to the right. On a scale from -3 to +3, there's a strong tendency to buy more, which means this is project business. Choosing the buy option means this project is becoming business for the organization here, of course, who makes this decision, because now they go buying that. So they go into a business here. And of course, for vendors, maybe service providers or delivering goods or whatever it is, vendors who now can become contractors in here. And by the way, these vendors can have more vendors work for them, subcontractors, subcontractors, and so on. And that's the topic of our discussion here. One aspect of procuring things, of buying things instead of making things, is that you bring strangers into your project. To a certain degree, you can work with incumbent suppliers. You know them, you have had them in your projects for a while, but now you need more vendors. It's a growing business, a growing market. So you bring strangers into your project. Even known vendors, things can change there. New ownership, new management, new employees, whatever it is. And the organization that you knew very well 2 years ago has changed so much and is strange to you again. And Mark has a problem. He doesn't know how to do that. He has no experience with that. A lot of business units offered him help. Actually, they were trying to keep influence in that, or maybe gain new influence in that. I have some examples here: the purchasing department, technical, legal people, management, of course. There's an interesting thing about contracting. When you have a schedule in your project, it's the schedule of your project. It's a commitment made by the project. If you have an HR plan, if you have budget, whatever it is, these are all documents that are documents of your project. The commitments in these plans and in these agreements are commitments of the project. If you have a contract, it's not just the project, it's the entire organization that is obliged to deliver something, either on contractor side, deliverables, or on customer side, first of all, payments, of course, plus some other things, enabling services and provisions and many more things. So it's obligations on both sides. So that's why management wants to be part of the picture here, and legal, of course, the same reason. You may have a special contract department, and there may be more than that. So what he finds is he has to talk now with departments that were not that relevant to him before. Now they become relevant for him. He has no defined interfaces with them, and there's also this external interface. Mark had to deal with contractors and subcontractors, subcontractors, and so on. Yeah, the world becomes very complex very quickly here. Finding good contractors is a hard thing to do. Most of the problems that I see in project business have a root cause, and that's someone has decided to go with the wrong organization. And again, it's true for both sides. Contractors should be more selective who to work for. Customers should be more selective who they want to work for them. Then what you see is the development of highly complex project supply networks. That's a very interesting thing here with the project supply networks, because it's nowhere described in literature and in education and wherever you go. One of the coincidences of my life was that I was in manufacturing, particularly in automotive industry, about 25, 30 years ago, when the foundations were laid for modern supply chain management. Supply chain management replaced an older approach, which was called the extended workbench. Extended workbench means we do things by ourselves. Here and there, we have a contractor. And that's more or less the picture that you find in literature, including books like the PMBOK Guide and some others. Yeah? It's not seen as a core task in project management to do procurement. It's here and there necessary, and so we do that. In automotive industry, we had this extended workbench, which meant The automotive manufacturer does all the work inside the own factories, and here and there something is given out to suppliers because they lack the knowledge or the machines or whatever it is to do it. So, but this was rather the exception. And as a production manager, you had to justify when you bought something instead of making it by yourself. Today is completely different. Today, they have to justify when things are done inside the own organization. The normal understanding is, of course, we have contractors for that. And supply chains are very well engineered. If you go to a Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, Ford, whatever you like, to a supply chain engineer there, they can tell you what the fourth tier subcontractor somewhere in Spain will be doing in 2 months' time, and how the products they make will go through the third tier and second tier and first tier, and when the results will finally arrive at the production line here in Munich or in Stuttgart or so. And they can tell you exactly what will happen on this way, when it will happen on this way, in what quality they will get that. I remember, because a coincidence in my life, I was there. I remember the big driving forces by the time, ISO 9000, which allowed to have a quality management system, expanding the corporate premises, going into other organizations, and we could talk with each other because we have similar systems here. EDI, which means that we have computer communication, computerized communication between organizations, not only inside the organization, but between the organizations. And some very, very intelligent people, some people who were visionary and who had the idea to make things differently to the past. And that's where we are today. In manufacturing, in production, things like automotive and some similar industries. I observed the same thing happening in project management. Many things that were made in the past are bought today, and the survey confirmed that. I'm not 100% sure what effect COVID-19 will have here. My impression at the moment is it's not slowing down this process, it's further driving the process. Companies have to become faster, more agile, and that's one of the reasons why things are bought that in the past would have been made. It takes too long to make it in-house. Even with all these processes, business development and so on, taking their time, the expectation is giving projects out of house is a way to speed them up, make them easier, make them maybe cheaper sometimes, make them simpler, because somewhere else, there is another manager with management attention, there is staff there is know-how there, and so on. So that's the expectation, that this will speed up the project. And we see the same here. And Mark, and no one, by the way, no one nowhere has ever learned how to engineer project supply networks similarly to supply chains in production. One big problem, and I will show you some data on that in a minute, is business interests. When you do things internally in the organization, you have one organization with one business interest. Now we have 2 or 10 or hundreds of organizations, and each of them has its own business interests. You have to take care of that, otherwise this will destroy your project. For some of his contractors, Mark's project was number one. Mark and his project were the king. But for others, it was just secondary. They didn't promise him that at the beginning. They promised him during business development, of course, Mark, if you come to us with your project, if you give it to us and pay us for that, of course, you will be king. Your organization will be king. For us, customer is king. And then he signed the contract with them. And some others signed too. legal department, management, and so on. And then he found out he's no more the king. At this point, the signature of the contract, at this point, the world has changed. And now he is far more the customer in the waiting line of a cash desk in a supermarket. Yeah? And he finds the waiting line in front of him sometimes very, very long. He is told, we will do the work for you when we are free for that. At the moment, we have other customers to serve first. And that's what he also found with some of these contractors. Working with contractors can be very satisfying. It can be awfully frustrating. Yeah. He was confronted with legal terms, with terminology that he never learned. One of the big problems we have in project business management is a confusion of terminology. Preview of contracts, I have an example here, statement of work. How often do we have discussions here in Germany how to correctly translate statement of work? In Germany, we have a word for that, Lastenheft, and I think it's the same. I have a lot of colleagues, trainer colleagues, they tell me, no, Oliver, you're wrong, it's not the same. And so we need to unify our language and our understanding here. Then these acronyms here, request for proposal, invitation for bid, invitation to pitch, invitation to tender for our British friends, request for quotation, and so on. We have to understand the words, we have to understand the acronyms, and we have to develop a common understanding. Otherwise, we will have misunderstandings in our project. It's one of the big tasks of the Project Business Foundation, by the way. Unifying language is one of the big tasks ahead of us. If you think you should be part of that, please join us, please help us. You are welcome to do that. Developing a common glossary for all the parties involved here is a task. It's a huge task. The beginning is easy, but then when you have different interpretations of terms and of acronyms, and you have to understand them, and you have to make a decision, which is the one that we want to make the valid one, yeah? Then things start to become difficult. Yeah? And then the responses to these acronyms, proposals, bid, pitches, and so quotations. Not many people know what a pitch is, by the way. Pitch is actually a kind of tendering, proposal, quotation process where the customer has a fixed budget. I want to buy something for $10 million. Vendor A, what do I get from you for $10 million? Vendor B, what do I get from you for $10 million? So this is not a price competition. Bid, invitation for bid, that's price competition. Pitch is the opposite. It's a pure solution competition. Don't expect that people understand it like that, know it like that. A lot of people will have a different understanding for that, and that's a cause for confusion and for misunderstandings. And misunderstandings, as we will see later in this little session, misunderstandings can lead to very expensive project failure. So this is an important issue. That's not a side issue. That's a core problem that we have in project business management, a lack of common languages. Yeah? And some more here. Then the worst case scenario, if things go really wrong, really, really wrong. In an internal project, the project will end under the rug of management. Yeah? We did so much wrong. We don't want people to know that. So let's keep it in private here. Let's keep it inside the protective walls of the organization. Outside, no one must know that. As soon as we are in project business management, we have at least 2, maybe many more organizations involved, and when things go wrong, this can end at court. Court typically means public. It's in the public realm. Yeah? It's open for competitors, for the media, for whoever you like, to see that and to see what has gone wrong here. So that's different again. And by the way, lawsuits consume management attention. This very scarce thing. Of course, you have a lawyer to do the lawsuit for you, but the lawyer will need your help. The lawyer will need the support of management to know what has happened in this case. Yeah. Mark spoke to his manager, boss, we need a solution. And that's what I'd like to talk with you about. First of all, what are the challenges? Before we can talk about solutions, we need to discuss the problem, the challenge, the thing to which we need a solution. I showed you my survey on make or buy decisions. Here's the opposite side. I asked project managers, are you in an internal project or are you in a customer project? Customer project are the red bars here, or something different. The world is not just those two types of projects. There are some more that do not fit into this black and white picture. So I have them here just to catch them. I asked this question 3 times with the same wording. And the interesting thing is what we find here. Red is larger than blue, sometimes much larger than blue. So more project managers today work for paying customers. Their situation was the discussion of last Tuesday. For us here, the important thing is if they work for paying customers, there must be a lot of project work handed out today to contractors. And actually, I think more is handed out today than really done internally. Sometimes a mix of both. Of course, some work is done internally, some work is done with contractors, but there is an overweight of work given out to contractor. Organizations do more procurement, yeah, and more projects are done by organizations for paying customers. I already talked about PSNs, project supply networks. I have a very simple PSN here. We have a customer at the top. We have a first tier with contractors. On the right-hand side, the contractor is actually a prime contractor. Prime contractor is interesting because this is somewhere in a sandwich. This prime contractor is the contractor to the buyer, to the customer, of course, but is buyer again. It's the contractor of subcontractors, sellers again. And by the way, there may be a 3rd tier, a 4th tier. Things can become very, very complex. Some years ago, I asked someone from Airbus, do you have an idea how many organizations participated in the development of the A380, the big super jumbo jet? And he told me, no, we don't know, which is typical, by the way. Companies don't know that. We believe it's about 1,500 organizations, and it's not engineered. And by the way, I'm not criticizing Airbus here. Please don't misunderstand me here. This is the typical common situation that we have at the moment, that organizations have sellers, have contractors and subcontractors and so on, and they don't have the full picture who actually is in my project. There may be some organizations in the projects that you definitely don't want to have them. Maybe your competitor, your direct competitor, or maybe some questionable organizations, organized crime, whatever you like. There's a lot of organized crime, unfortunately, in project business. I have another survey here. It's very recent. We had a meeting with Sunil Prashara, the CIO and president of PMI, Project Management Institute, and we had some very brief surveys in there. One of these surveys, the question was, how many organizations do we have in such a sandwich situation? Yeah. Sorry, that's not the wrong one. We asked here, how much of the work is going out? How much of your work is going out? And 13% said nothing is going out. All the project work is done with internal resources. Right? The next 3, from some work is handed out to most or all work is handed out, and we have these complex multi-tier networks. Yeah? So that's altogether 87%. Yeah? The majority of projects today use that, and some of them, the 2 bottom bars, if you like, It is a major aspect of project management to do project business management, to work with external resources. This is an area often driven by conflicts. Sometimes work with contractors goes very well. As I said, it can be very satisfying to work with contractors. And I think the majority of situations is just that. It's good business, hopefully for both parties. But then we have situations when conflicts turn up, and we have to be prepared for these conflicts. Otherwise, what we will do is fair weather project management when we do project business. We have to be prepared for the bad weather, for the thunderstorms, not because we want them, but because from time to time they will come. They are inevitable. Now, ask people the causes of conflicts between contract parties. How would you rank them? And there was a scale from 0 to 5, and almost 3 on that scale, the largest bar, conflicting business interests in projects among the parties. And actually, if from hindsight you think about that, it's easy to understand. Diversity of cultures, legal systems, the next thing. Yeah? Incompatible egos, that's an interesting one. If you have two organizations working together, both have managers. Managers tend to be people with strong ego. Yeah? What if they don't match? If they're incompatible, if they clash, maybe. Yeah? What if you find bullies there? Yeah? Contractors with too many customers. You are now on the waiting line. You're no more the king. Yeah? One thing actually that I have down here, it's much rarer than the others, obviously, but when it happens, it can be one of the worst things that can happen to you, default of a party. And that's risk for both contractors and customers. If you ever had a situation where you had a customer going bankrupt, or you had a contractor going bankrupt, maybe a key contractor in your project going bankrupt, you know precisely what I am talking about here. This can be a very, very difficult situation. It can destroy your project. Then another interesting thing is the way how projects realize benefits. We are here on the customer side, a customer project on the customer side. Project business is still more or less an internal project. We do the project for our own needs. The organization does the project because they need some new services, products, wants to change something in the organization or whatever it is, but it's done for own purposes. And the top one we see here is a life cycle where we have a project life cycle, then a kind of delivery, and then after the project life cycle is a benefit realization life cycle. That's what you find in literature. When you learn things like return on investment calculation, benefit cost ratio, net present value, internal rate of return, and all these things, particularly when you look into literature, they describe this situation. Yeah, if we have a project, think of something like building a bridge. Yeah, at one point in time, there is a grand opening kind of delivery to operations, to traffic operations. Now, cars and pedestrians and bicycles, whatever you like, can use the bridge, can realize benefits from that. Maybe there is some toll payment for the bridge, so there is also a monetary benefit for those who built the bridge. That's the model that you normally find in literature. Mostly ignored in literature, which I think is strange because it's today, in my observation, the far more common model is the use of stage deliveries. The product is no more handed over just in one moment. At this moment, this delivery, grand opening or whatever you like, yeah? Start of production in a production environment. This is not the moment that the project is being finished and that the benefit realization begins. There are some partial deliveries beginning here, yeah? And then some more and some more. So a partially finished project is handed over, and then some more steps. So benefit realization can start before the project is finished. But nevertheless, in this model, as much as in that, we have most benefit realization in the future. The project may take us, I don't know, 1 or 2 years maybe. Benefit realization may be there for 30 years or so. So that's the normal situation we have in most industries. I see it in defense, I see it in aerospace, I see it in construction, in software, of course, IT, wherever you go. We start with the first partial delivery and then add more and more functionality and components of a product or whatever it is. And at the end, the last delivery ends the project, but the benefit realization has started much, much earlier. That's your situation when you do projects with contractors. Unfortunately, their perception is completely different. They have this perception here, most cases. Again, there are exceptions to that. In most cases, you have a payment scheme during the course of the project, maybe monthly, maybe for milestones or whatever it is. And the first payment begins benefit realization for your contractor. And the last payment ends this benefit realization. In many organizations, by the way, contractors are making a loss more or less all the time because they lay out money for you. It's the last payment that turns the loss possibly into a profit. And they have to make profit to survive. That's not greed, that's need. Then another interesting aspect of project business management is it does not begin with a contract here. It does not begin with a project charter on contractor side. It begins much, much earlier. I think that's easier to understand from the buyer side than from the seller side, where quite often the signature of the contract with the customer is considered the beginning of the project. For a customer, it's more normal to say, no, it begins really with a make or buy decision. The project business process begins with a make or buy on the buyer's decision. The buyer is not yet the contractor because there is no contract there. But now we go into this process of business development. And actually, it's business development for both sides. The buyer is developing business with a seller, often over a competitive process, as we see it here, kind of invitation to bid, request for proposal process in here, ask for offers, gets the offer, makes a decision here, who to make the contractor, and then one of the sellers becomes the contractor and does the business here. We have to look at the entire process here. And for both sides, customer and contractor, I think we all know examples. We all know examples of situations where the big mistakes were made here upfront. Something was done wrong here, and later the project was suffering from that. Another problem with this model, and again, it's true on both sides, customer and contractor. Before we have a contract, the focus for all parties involved is typically on competing. There's competition between these sellers. Each of them wants to do the business with the customer. So they compete for the business because this buyer, when it becomes customer, it will become the customer of one contractor here, not of all three. They don't buy the same thing 3 times. So there is some competition between them, but there's also competition between the buyer and the sellers. The buyers want as much product, service, whatever it is, for the smallest amount of money possible. And the view of the seller is the opposite, of course. Get as much money as possible for as little effort and own costs as possible. So there is a lot of competition during this time. At the moment when the contract has been signed, when the 2 organizations, contractor and customer, work together, the focus must change from competing to completing. It's one of the nice games with words that you can do in the English language. I would love to translate this into German. It's not possible, unfortunately. But now we are in a completing phase. And the more we compete in this phase, the more unlikely it will be that will have a satisfactory completion, and satisfactory for all parties involved, by the way, not just for the customer, for the buyer. I think sellers are also important with their needs. We have to look at all the needs. So we have to change our behavior. It's one of the difficult things, maybe the most difficult thing of all in project business management. While we are in a pre-contract phase, pre-award phase, the focus is on competition, and then we have to change our behavior from being competitive to have a focus on completion. And I think that's very difficult to change behavior. And it can become even more difficult if you think that many of these organizations not just have one project, one business development, one project. They have a number of them. And some of them are in this pre-award phase. And the focus is very much on competition. At the same time, just another negotiation table, maybe. Yeah? Maybe another phone call. Yeah? You put down the phone with your prospective contractor, the seller that you are talking with, and now you have to talk with an actual contractor. You have immediately to change your behavior, just moving from one room to the other, or just in another phone call. Yeah? And now you have to put the focus on completion, different way to talk with each other, different style of speaking, of writing, and so on. Yeah? Motivating the other side is now very, very important to do a good job. Before we had the contract, it was more motivating to develop a cheap offer, or putting a lot of things into the offer, a lot of deliveries. So what we see is that's another difficulty, because we have to move between those two behaviors. By the way, some people say competitive business development is a bad decision to start with. This should already be very strategic and very much focused on completing. And I do not disagree with these people, but I don't see a chance at the moment to bring many changes in here. Yeah? It's just a challenge that we have, and it's a big challenge. I already talked about supply chains. This is the typical makeup of a supply chain in production, in manufacturing, sometimes in service environments. You have several tiers of organizations, and everyone has his place. Every organization has its place in this model, like a pecking order also. And it's very easy to understand. And it is well engineered in production, in manufacturing, at least in theory. But it's all there to do that. Now we have our project supply networks, and it's far more unorderly, and it's more dynamic. Things are changing here. And a lot of aspects can come in here. Look at this contractor. This contractor is a first-tier contractor to the customer. On this way, delivers something directly to the customer, but delivers something different to another contractor who then delivers the customer. So here, this contractor is a second-tier contractor. So things can become very complex. Here's a consortium. A consortium is a temporary joint venture. It was founded for the project, and unless it has some work to do when the project has been finished, it's very likely that the consortium will be dissolved again. So these contractors here are not direct contractors to the customer. They are inside the consortium. Maybe they work for the consortium. Maybe they just let the consortium do the work and just have their money in. Yeah? And what we see is some more contractors. One here works for a member of the consortium. Another one has a contract with the entire consortium. So things get very, very difficult to engineer and to manage and to understand, and they can change over time. And sometimes when you then have a look, who is all inside this project and who is working for my project, you may be really surprised, because you find organizations in there that you definitively did not want to have there. I know one case where a major competitor of an organization was in the organization's lighthouse project, precisely in that project where you don't want to have your competitor, and the competitor was just there. Yeah. And I know other places where you find the mafia inside such a project. Very large project, of course, a mega project. But there's an organization in a consortium, which at least I know is a member of organized crime. Yeah. And it's in there, it's in the project. Yeah. So what is a solution? What is a very fundamental solution? We cannot go into all details here. But one solution that we need to have, or one way to a solution, was described by NASA in the year 2000. And I'd like to show you an example here, how to find solutions. NASA, by the end of the 20th century, had a series of failed projects. One of them was the Mars Climate Orbiter. By the way, when we talk about a failed project here, the value of such a project, we are talking about billions of dollars here. It's the value of the project itself and of the probe itself, but also of all the research that's building upon the availability of this probe. It's not just the probe itself. A lot of research projects and study projects were expecting this probe to be there and to help them. And if you put this all together, it's a billion, more than a billion, maybe several $billion. And by the way, lots of jobs were depending on that as well. And they lost the climate orbiter just shortly before it had to enter the orbit of Mars to measure the climate over a longer period. NASA and scientists wanted to know, what is the climate on Mars? What is happening there over time? In the end, one reason is curiosity, of course, but in the end, another reason is to better understand Earth climate. The more we also know other climates and other climate conditions, the easier it will be to understand Earth climate, which is an important issue for all of us today, as we know. Our climate is in danger. There was a problem, and they lost the probe of the problem, and NASA believes now, after some research, they believe there was a communication problem. They got thrust data developed by Lockheed, their contractor. Lockheed had to send thrust data for a rocket engine to NASA to control this rocket. The purpose of the rocket is easier to understand. If you fly to Mars, your probe has to be very, very fast. Mars is far away from us. When you want to enter an orbit around Mars, you have to be much, much slower. Gravitation of Mars is not very high. It's smaller and it's lighter than Earth. So you have to slow down the orbiter to allow it to enter this orbit. And for that, you need precisely an understanding how long the rocket engine has to work and how much thrust it has to bring during that time. So it's thrust times time. And for NASA, all their history, it was clear to them, NASA uses metrical units, so they would measure that in Newton seconds. How many Newtons times, how many seconds do they have to have the engine produce thrust, the rocket engine produce thrust? NASA was once founded by a German, Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun had no idea how to use US customary units, so he said that's strange to me. I want to work with metrical units, and NASA is still in this tradition today. Lockheed considered it to go without saying. Yes, of course, we use US customary units. Pound seconds is the kind of measurement we are using because Lockheed is American, NASA is American. It is easy to understand for everyone that they use US units. Down here, you see the calculation factor, and it's a small one, it's a big one. So 4.45 Newtons. All the numbers they got were wrong by a factor of 4.45. Yeah. So yeah, it got lost. Obviously, it was a communication problem, roughly 20 years ago, a bit more than that. How could it happen that this very simple thing was not sufficiently communicated? And what they found out is there was no common understanding that we want this project to be successful. And again, one of the topics here is conflict of interests. From a project management perspective, life is very simple for us. We say we need a lot of communications. It is so important that we talk about everything to make sure that problems like this will not destroy our project. Talk with a lawyer, talk with a corporate counsel about this topic. They may have a different opinion on that. What they may tell you is don't talk too much. Don't write too much, particularly down, because everything that you write down could be used again in the worst case scenario, which is a lawsuit. If there's some litigation in this project, someone may use this all against us. So be careful what you communicate, and in particular what you communicate in writing. So that's one of the conflicts of interests we are in. Another one is time. It takes time to communicate. Time we cannot use for development of things, for other things. It takes resources to do that. This has somewhat changed. Meanwhile, today we have things like Zoom here. We have WebEx and GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams and so many other things. This was late 20th century, so you had telephone, you had telefax. It was a bit more, you had to do meetings, which meant you had to travel to be at a meeting and then travel home later again. So it took more time. It was more costly. It was about time, it was about resources, and it was about goodwill and trust. Can I talk openly with you without being later confronted with what I said to my own disadvantage? So it's a difficult thing. I think it got a bit easier, but these big questions, it costs time, remains, and legal implications also remains a problem. NASA wrote a report on that. There was a mishap investigation board for the Mars Climate Orbiter, and they wrote a report on that. If someone of you wants to have this report, just send me an email, oliver@oliverlehmann.com, and I will send it to you. You can also try to find it in the internet. I think it's not that difficult to find in the internet. 13th of March 2000, the report, or just ask me, I will send it to you. And I think it's one of the most interesting documents I read for a long time. What it says is the following. NASA had a paradigm, faster, better, and cheaper in the past. That's original from the text of the Mishap Investigation Board. They had a paradigm, faster, better, cheaper, faster, better, cheaper, sorry. There's a problem with the paradigm. Actually, you have three priorities: faster, better, and cheaper. It's difficult to follow three priorities. As soon as you have three priorities, you don't have a priority at all. If you ask someone who is in scheduling, Mars is only accessible for a very short time window, then it will run away again from, or Earth actually will run away from Mars, I think. The distance will get larger again. So you have a short time window when you can do that. We need to be faster to not miss this time window. That's what one group said. Maybe the scientists who want to have their investigations on the probe will say, no, better is more important so that we get good data, reliable data. And if you ask some people from the finance department, they will say, sorry, cheaper is the most important thing. We are using tax money here. We have to be cheap to be saving tax money. So different people will have different priorities, and each of them will be right. No one is really wrong. NASA by the time wanted to be more like a company, but they are not a company. They are a government agency, and government agencies should follow different priorities maybe. And that's what this report proposes, to have It says, in addition to that, I think it actually means instead of that, to have a new approach, a new vision, a new paradigm, which is called mission success first. When we make decisions for the project, number one question is, which of the options that we can take does support mission success best? Mission success is number one. It's not just about speed and cost and so on and quality. It's about the success of the entire mission. And they say it's a new culture, new methods of managing projects. And on the first glance, you would say, oh, well, of course, yeah, mission success is important. No, it's really a change. It is a big, big change to say mission success comes first. To proceed with this culture shift, another thing was important for them. All individuals should feel ownership and accountability. Before they had this mission success first vision, the understanding of NASA was, of people at NASA and people at Contractors was, as long as I do a good job, it doesn't matter whether the project fails or not. I did a good job. I got my work paid, yeah, and that's what matters to me. And it's an organizational success. It's not my personal success. It's organizational failure if it fails, not my personal failure. Now they say each individual, independent from where the person sits, at a contractor, at NASA, somewhere else, should feel ownership and accountability, yeah? Not only for the own work, but for the entire mission. Think of a football team. When someone hits a goal, that's not just success for the person. Of course, it's success for the person, but it's success for the team. The entire team has achieved something. One had made the goal, but the others have created the environment that made that happen. Protected maybe the player from opposite players, yeah? Or bind them, yeah? Keep them busy, or whatever it is. Yeah? So it's joint success. It's the success of each individual. And also it's the failure when it fails for each individual. They all can be proud or embarrassed when things go wrong. And another quote from the document, Mission Success First, is the overarching focus of this report. I think if we can succeed in our project business to make it being based on a mission success first understanding, we will have better business. And that's not easy. And to go one step further, you probably can't do it alone. So where are we today? Where are we today? Project business management on both sides, contractors and customers, is learned by trial and error. No, we need professional qualification for that. The difficulty is, where do you get that? There are not many people out there who can do that. We need literature. I have some books here. I know 4 books about that. 4 books for such a topic. A major contribution to worldwide business, to worldwide economies, to the project economy is project business. And we just have 4 books. That's incredible. We need more literature. We need training. We need consulting here. We need academia, by the way. They're also missing. Then what we need is very simple, phone numbers. We need people who help people like Mark here, if he has a problem, a number he can call and say, I have a question, I have a problem. Can you help me? Can you give me advice? Sometimes the best place to make decisions is to be in the middle of the situation, to really knowing what's going on and to seeing it from a proximity. But sometimes a much better position is from a distance, from a person who is not involved, has no emotions in that, but has had similar situations in the past. So this person should in the end subscribe to the same motto, mission success. There's one thing about trial and error as we have it today. On both sides, we see people learn project business management by trial and error. If you're doing a project with contractors and subcontractors, with project supply networks, trial is very expensive and error even more. So, and now I'm happy to answer questions here. We have a Q&A chat in here, so please feel free to put your questions in here. Reputation in the market. Mohammed asks a question here, and Mohammed, I allow you to talk here. So, can you bring your question?
Good evening, Oliver. Thanks for the presentation and the webinar. My question was regarding the reputation of the project manager. If he is not in control or if he's not in a strong matrix organization, the reputation can even affect the project manager and the organization reputation in the market, not only inside the organization.
Yes, fully agree, fully agree. If you have contractors and then the contractors notice that the project manager on customer side is in a very weak position, this will influence the reputation of the customer organization in this business. The reputation with the contractors will be, they are not really seriously about the project. They don't care very much about what we are doing. Yeah, and that's something you don't want to you don't want contractors to feel and to believe. You want them to believe that you take things very, very seriously. Fully agreed, Mohammed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was only confirming that education and consultancy within the project business management is so essential for these situations. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you have internal projects and you have troubles there with people, with departments, with whatever it is, you have consultants who will help you, psychologists and business people and consultants to every little bit. But then when it's about problems with contractors, there's no more consultancy out there who is really strong in it. And the same is true for the contractor side. Yeah? We need to develop these consultants and the trainers. We need academia here. Academia is completely silent all around the world, completely silent in this topic. We need it all. We need literature. Yes, fully agreed. Billy had a hand raised earlier. Billy Mwape. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Sorry if I don't do that. Billy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Absolutely amazing, the presentation. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I have a question on a complex situation that I actually found myself in, where we had a contractor who hit into high attrition. They lost the key performers on their project in the tenure of the contract. And along the process, they lost the mission of the project because there was no retention on information about the project. And at the end of the day, the contract tenure lapsed. And now this is an organization that has centralized contract management. It had to go to government for attorney general for you to extend the contract. And so it ended into a catastrophic end. That project was a project failure. Do you think we have some mitigants that we can engage in to avoid such situations? Thank you.
Thank you for asking, and it's a very good question. I think we have some approaches here. First of all, what we have at the Project Business Foundation is an offering. It's called Project Business Healing Days. Project Business Healing Days mean we take a day. We don't always need the entire day, but we take as a day. We bring the customer. It's mostly done by customers, by the way. They are the sponsors of that. Customers and contractors brings them in a room. And it's a bit like family therapy. Yeah, we do some kind of a family therapy. There's a lot of fighting in the family, but in a family, most things is they all want the same. They want to have good time together. I want to be successful as a family. So we do a very similar thing and say, look, there is so much fighting and so much struggling and so many conflicts between contractors, among contractors, by the way, then between contractors and customer and so on. Let's go together and find ways out of this trap, find a way that we can get back to a situation where this works well. I know it's very difficult in a government environment because there is another important factor, that's law. And another difficulty may come from things like parliaments also that also want to have a say here because it's public money that is spent. Yeah, maybe we can invite them there as well. But they are the experts for that anyway. The experts for that will sit in the room. So we don't have to worry too much about that. But I understand that the situation is more complex here. But nevertheless, I think that's a very good approach. And it's very similar really to family therapy. It's a bit like project business therapy, what we are doing in here. And normally a day is enough. So from what you're telling me, I think this would be the offer that we could do to help them. I did it in some organizations at some places, and we had very interesting results. And in the end, people wonder, why did we need this moment? It was a great time, yes, of course, but why did we need it? Why were we not able to do it on our own? And sometimes the parties are no more able to do it alone. So then is the time to bring in a third party. And that's one of the things we can do here. Other things are mediation and arbitration that we can also offer. But for the case that you're describing in all its complexity, I think it's not just mediation or arbitration. I think it's really healing. Has nothing to do with esoterics. Yeah, it's healing like family therapy. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you very much. Then the next question I have here is from David Odigi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, David. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much, Oliver, and team. Thank you for a great session again. It's really not a question, just two comments to align with what you already said. I have seen situations where, in agreement with what you said, where organizations have so many projects and they are spread so thin, you truly don't get that management support, and it becomes a bigger problem for the organization. So I think one way to address that is organization doing better work with prioritization, trying to make sure they understand the key initiative that will take them to where their vision is, and making sure they don't spread too thin. So that way you can get the executive support, you can put your scarce dollars, resources in the right project that will take you to your destination. In addition, I also want to just add, project business management is key, is unique, and is, like you said, education and material in this area is not there right now. We need to develop it. So building a community of practice is very key. And thank you to the work you and the other team members in project business management. What you are doing is truly building this community of practice so that most of us that are project managers, that are practitioners, that are trainers, we have the right information. They say an investment in knowledge pays the highest interest. So we need to truly invest in knowledge to understand both sides of the coin, both sides of the business, both the project side and the business side, for us to truly be able to deliver value to our clients and our stakeholders. So again, thank you so much. And that's why I'm a strong advocate for this. Every project manager I run it to, I tell them, you need to be part of project business because you need to learn. You need to get better at what you do every day. So thank you for the good work. And I think starting project business management, the timing is ripe because we really need this in the community to be able to deliver better value.
And the other thing is, if you are a trainer, if you are a consultant, if you are a book author, whatever it is, companies are burning so much money with poor project business management, not just poor project management. And maybe the project management is not that poor, but the business side is poor. And they are burning so much money on both sides. And that's a business case to do something for them. Our goal is to have better projects, but there's another goal, of course. That's a business case for yourself to live from that and to have income from that. And I made a decision for myself. This is my future. Yeah. I'm 62 now, by the way. That's an age where many people go into retirement, and that's their idea for the future. My idea for the future is to help develop a business discipline. And it's not a new business. It's not new business. It has been around for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, I'm sure. But it's new that people put a focus on that and say, we have to understand what is happening here. We need things like good practices. We need methodologies. We need to develop tools for that. We need a glossary. That's where it begins. Yeah, very simple things. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
Let's talk with Silvanus instead. Silvanus Agim. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this not correctly. Yeah, Silvanus, can you? Yeah.
Yeah, hello, Oliver.
Hello.
Good to see you in person. Good to see you. I've always read about you.
Thank you very
But I've
much.
been following this and I'm so excited being part of it. And I wish to key in. My question is, what's the difference between family therapy and arbitration?
Between arbitration and what? Mediation.
And and the family therapy,
Okay.
which you talked about some
Yes.
few minutes ago.
Mediation means you have two parties who cannot find conflict resolution alone. So they bring in a third party. This project business healing day is often more than two parties, but mediation, arbitration is typically with two parties, customer and contractor, obviously in our case. A mediation means there is someone there who both sides trust. They just sit together in a more informal setting. The setting is very informal. It could be in a restaurant or somewhere. It could be at a kitchen table, wherever you like, in the park. Someone is there who helps them identify misunderstandings, find areas of common interests and common concerns, and try to bring those two parties to see the commonality stronger than the things where they differ from each other, the diversity between them, the differences between them. The mediator is an informal person. It's more a good friend of both sides. Both have respect of this person. And the mediator changes the focus from the conflict to the joint interests. An arbitrator is a much more formal setting. The arbitrator may be unknown to the two parties at the very beginning. It may be someone no one knows, may come from a chamber of commerce. They do this sometimes. Or it may come from courts. Courts also provide arbitrators. Arbitration differs in another thing. The arbitrator makes a statement, makes a recommendation what a solution could look like. And then the two parties, very formally, have the opportunities to say yes to that. Then it was successful. Or if one party only says no to this solution, then the arbitration is failed. There's a special version of arbitration that's binding arbitration. There has been some maybe law or some agreement or so beforehand that the statement of the arbitrator, the arbiter, is considered binding, which means the arbiter becomes almost as powerful as a judge. But the difference is it's done behind closed doors. Normally, a court case is done in a public environment. Arbitration, binding arbitration, can happen behind closed doors. So actually, it's three variants that we have. If you're interested in learning more about that and how we can use that, I have a recommendation for you. Just a second. This is the website of the Project Business Foundation. And there we have under programs, no, it's not true. No, it is true, of course. Alternative dispute resolution, there it is.
Okay.
You saw this, by the way. We use things repeatedly, of course, because they are important to us. Yeah? So here is what we can generally, we have a negotiation, the two parties sit together, they cannot find a resolution, so they start with ADR, alternative dispute resolutions, in order to avoid costly lawsuits. That's the thing behind that, and to ensure privacy and confidentiality. That's the other reason why someone would use that. And we have mediation, which is more the informal session. We have arbitration, which is more formal, and the most formal, and then almost as powerful as a court case would then be binding arbitration. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. Akbar Azmir.
Can you hear me now, Oliver?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. Thank you very much for the webinar. It's a very good presentation. Got a questions regarding the contracts and how different cultures perceive contracts differently. I've read somewhere about the a high context culture and a low context culture, where in a high context country or culture, they perceive contract sort of informally, instead of like low context countries. Like, if, for example, if I'm not mistaken, Germany is one of those low context, the most low context country, where they perceive contracts more seriously, instead of countries like maybe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Japan or Saudi Arabia or something. So in a complex PSN, we may have some subcontractors or contractors that are coming from different cultures. So have you ever experienced those, and how is the best approach for this condition? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic that you're bringing up here. First of all, the work of Edward T. Hall with low and high context cultures.
Yes, that's right.
His work is a bit old.
Yeah.
I personally think it's too simplified, far too simplified. Cultures are far more complex than just on a scale from high to low context, or black and white, as some people see it. I think it's too much simplifying here, and I think the perception of contracts and what the meaning of a contract, whether a contract is sacred or not, I think that's not a question of high and low context. I know there are cultures that have a tradition that contracts are not as sacred. I don't want to put names on these labels now, because it's very easy to make cliches out of that. I'm not interested in cliches, but some countries have in their culture contracts as less important, others have it as higher important, and I think it has nothing to do with high and low context cultures. High context, by the way, for those who don't know what we are talking about, high context cultures means a word can have different meanings in different contexts. The two most important words are yes and no. In a low context culture, Germany is his example for a low context culture. Yes simply means yes and nothing else. No means no and nothing else. In a high context culture, it can mean yes. Yes can mean yes, but yes can mean many other things. And sometimes no can mean yes, and yes can mean no, and so on. Yeah. So it's getting a bit more complicated. I think this the thing with a contract, with the tendency to stick to contracts or to be in breach of contracts, is a totally different dimension. I don't see the see the link here. What I see as a link is a completely different thing. In some countries, a contractor and a customer are seen on eye level. Germany again, yeah, USA. They are seen on eye level. And again, I don't want to talk about cliches, but it's my personal experience. If I go to Saudi Arabia, contractors and customers are not on eye level. the customer is higher and the contractor is lower. So what can happen if you have a German contractor and an Arabic customer? It may happen. I don't say it's always happening. It's not about cliches. Don't misunderstand me. But from the cultural point of view, it could well happen that the Germans are unhappy with the Saudis because information flow doesn't run as they expected. Their concerns are not taken seriously, and so on. The Saudi guys may be unhappy with the Germans because they experience them having a lack of respect. They're not respectful enough because they are lower, so they should show respect to the customer. Instead, they just talk and they just ask and bring up concerns and want everything discussed and so on. That's what I would expect. That Germans are often considered rude in such a situation and respectless. Yeah, others communicate not enough and not clear enough and not open enough and accurately enough and so on. So that's what I would expect. But then, as soon as you understand that, and as soon as you understand that there are cultures behind that, that there is a cultural difference that causes that. And as soon as you also understand that cultures are changing dramatically, most cultures are changing dramatically at the moment, including the German, including the Saudi Arabian culture, things get easier to understand because you see, okay, it's just normal. If you do international business, you have to deal with other cultures and with other behaviors, and somehow you have to come along with that. I had precisely this situation with a Saudi Arabian customer and a German contractor not long ago. And as soon as the Germans understood what happens here, what is going on, what are the games that people play there, yeah, the problem was easy to resolve. The big problem was that they didn't understand it. They didn't know what's happening. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, very much. Thanks, Oliver.
I see Dimitris here. Dimitris, can you talk?
Hello, Oliver.
Hi, Dimitris.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. Yourself?
Okay, very good webinar, by the way.
Thank you.
One statement first, you're not getting older, you're getting wiser.
No, I'm getting older. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, my question has to do with finding books or internet sites, literature in general, where I can find the real projects from start to finish. I'm a new project manager, so I would like to find not only templates or tips for managing a project, but also I would like to see a project in, especially in IT, where my most projects are, from start to finish.
I think
from initiating to closure. It's something difficult I can find.
I think there's a good reason not to have, at least in the project business world. Most of what you do is under NDA. When I do trainings, I'm mostly under NDA as well. And even if we don't have a formal agreement, I'm informally still under NDA, maybe not a formal enforceable contract, but we all know what is expected from a trainer. Yeah. So one of the reasons is you cannot really talk about that. If you read my book on project business management, you will find I do a lot of storytelling, but with all these stories, I use insect names or arthropod, something like that, yeah, with an octopus maybe, or with a mosquito or so, and then you have mosquito incorporate or something like that. And the reason is I have to hide the names, and sometimes I change industries and do some other things so that no one has the feeling, hey, that's me. And that's, if they think it's my project that he describes, then they should also see it as a coincidence. Okay, some similar things happen somewhere else. Yeah, I don't want to put someone on the spot. As soon as you describe real projects with real names and real organizations and so on, you run into legal troubles, you destroy your reputation, and it's just something you shouldn't do. You don't want to put the people on spot that trust you. So they've got good reasons not to do that. What I can offer is with my book some storytelling that real life stories. All these stories in there are true, but those people involved would probably not notice that it's just them. Yeah? Because it's not to put people on spot. It's to talk about dynamics. It's to talk about maybe anecdotes sometimes, yeah, like them or not. It's to talk about what is happening in the real world. But that's why I would not expect that to actually exist. Yeah? And there's good reason. In our field, definitively. Yeah. If I would start giving you a reference list of all the organizations with whom I made project business healing days, yeah, what would I do to these organizations? I would put them on the spot that they had troubles with customers or mostly with contractors. Yeah. They don't want me to publish that, even with the knowledge everyone has that. Yeah. So I hope this, I didn't really answer your question, but it gave you maybe possible.
Oliver, I would like to find not the real names or the real projects, but I read a book where the project manager was Noah, you know, and he built the ark. There was a good example, not a real one. But I would like to find something like that, but in some industry, like construction. I wouldn't mind if it was a fictional.
I don't know one. I don't know one. I don't know one. Yeah.
Okay.
And apart from trainers who are in many organizations, per year every year I'm in 30, 40 organizations at least. In most cases, you know where people were. They were employed 4 or 5 years in organization XYZ, and then when they write a book about that, you know, okay, that's about organization XYZ. So it's more difficult. It's easy. It would even be easier for a trainer to hide that, because we have so many organizations that we see in short period of time. But if you're really in more the practitioner, I think that's getting very difficult to do. So there's reason why it doesn't exist. I understand, and you would love to have it. The next question is, how relevant would it be for you? The experience of other people is an interesting thing. And if you have a lot of different people and a lot of different experiences, you can learn a lot from that. But one specific project means you learn about the things that happened in that project. And they may be completely different to the things that happen in your project. Yeah.
Most of the times it's completely different.
Most of the time it's completely different. By the way, I have my, can show you something else. I have, it's not a book, it's an article. I have an article on a troubled, actually a failed software project. It's in PM World Library. That's where my articles for PM World journaled, if you know them. It's a magazine where they are. And one of them is an article. I was in a situation to name the organization because it's not my customer. Moon Failure at Lidl. If they were my customer, I would not have put the name in. They had a failed software project. It's already 2 years ago again. It's incredible. Yeah, and something about the mechanics behind that. Without going too much into detail, I have actually more knowledge about it than what I could put into this article. But then I would put people on the spot, because only a certain number of people know that. But the basic thing is this SAP project, it was not the problem of SAP that it failed, or the problem of Lidl, or of the consultancy that wanted to implement the SAP at Lidl. The problem was not any of these organizations. The problem were at the interfaces between these organizations. And that's our topic at Project Business Foundation, to look at the interfaces between the organizations. It's not one did it right, one did it wrong. It means they did not manage the interfaces sufficiently, made certain decisions too late, or not at all. That should have been done early in the project, because it was decisions on the interfaces, not in one organization, not in the other. Which is the leading system? This was the big question there. Is the leading system Lidl with its processes, or is it SAP with its software processes? By the way, my personal opinion is it should always be the software, the leading system, not the organization. It's easier to adjust an organization to a software than vice versa. But that's my personal opinion. You may not agree with that. Thank you for attending us, and I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I see some very, very friendly statements of attendees here. Yeah. So have a great weekend, all of you. I hope it was insightful for you. I hope it was interesting. And again, we at the Project Business Foundation, we need people to come to us as members, also as volunteers, to help us move forward, do new projects, new things that help this business discipline to grow and to become stronger. We are the only ones who look at project business. No one else does that. When we say we are the home of project business, that's really seriously. We are the only ones who look at that. No one else does that at the moment. So if this is your world, and if you think it is your future, then the Project Business Foundation should be your home. Thank you for your participation, and hope to see you next time again. By the way, Martin asked me to send you regards as well. He was not able to join us here because in his family there is a major problem. So he asked me to do it alone, and I said yes, of course. He will be with us, I'm sure, next time when we do these things together. So he asked me as the CEO to send you his regards. Thank you for your participation. Goodbye.